All right, we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. Is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So today we're going to be reviewing a clip from Tucker Carlson's interview with Glenn Loury, in which Glenn Loury essentially made the claim that he was fired from the Manhattan Institute over the Israeli-Palestinian issue. So we're just going to go through this, look at his thoughts, and see and analyze it. Is it how much sense does it make to work for a think tank? If you're working for a think tank, uh, how much independent are you in terms of your thoughts? Do you have to streamline your thoughts with the ideology of that think tank that you're working in? So I think Glenn Larry got a taste of that, and I just want to see his thought and see how much sense it makes. Uh, Earlier today, I had a conversation with a journalist, Paul Glickman, who is a retired journalist, and it was quite interesting. So those who haven't seen it, you can go back to rewatch it. So Stanley is joining me today in analyzing this issue. So Stanley, how are you doing?
I am doing well.
So did you see this coming? Did you see
Oh no, I
Ben being
saw the clip
fired
because
from the Manhattan?
it hopped up in my algorithm and I was kind of shocked. To be honest, I
Mm,
thought he was Manhattan for life,
mm,
especially
true.
with his eminence and all.
Yeah.
It was a little surprising to be honest.
So nothing is permanent. No one is secure.
Not these days. I honestly it I think that Glenn will be okay.
Yeah,
Manhattan
of course.
Institute may not.
Of course, he'll be okay. It's no doubt about him being okay. But it's just the look of it, right? The reason for which he was fired. Anyway, we're going to get into that. So let's just hear from Glenn himself. I will pause it in between to just give our thoughts and our commentary on it.
And I signed on there as a senior fellow, John Pulse, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. And we parted company recently at their behest, both their sponsorship of my podcast and their employment of me as a senior fellow because of some of the public comments that I had made at my podcast and some of the people whom I have interviewed there. Where the issue of the conflict in Palestine and Middle East and Gaza and Israel has come up. And I ran afoul of the sensibility of my friend, Raihan Salam, who's president of the Manhattan Institute, wrote me saying that we review our scholarly relationships from time to time. This is practically a quote for productivity. And there's no question about my productivity. I've put a dozen articles in their city journal over the last 5 years.
Stanley, it seems that what Glenn is saying is this whole firing thing, the conversation around the whole firing thing happened after he had a conversation. I think he had some guests on to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And if I
He
know,
gets into it.
yeah, if I know Glenn's position, he's not really that. He wasn't that. How will I put it? As passionate as he usually is on other topics, but it was clear that he wasn't taking the standard narrative. He wasn't like a kind of Candace Owens kind of or Tucker Carlson kind of support for the Palestinians, but it was clear that he had some sympathy for the Palestinians. But it seems very interesting to note that it was after he had this conversation that it ever occurred to the Manhattan Institute to make him know that there is a periodic review of their relationship with the people that they sponsor. I'm sure he's been with the Manhattan Institute for years, and at least 5 years from what he said. How come that had never happened before now? How come all of a sudden there is this policy where they get to review the works of people that they're affiliated with? What do you think was going on there?
Well, I'm sure somewhere in the fine print of a contract or something, it says, you will be up for periodic review. Um,
Mm,
I probably, my guess would be that, hey, I'm Glenn Loury. I'll be secure here. And I would have thought that if I were Glenn Loury too.
mm,
Um, I think the Manhattan Institute is going to have a bigger problem than Glenn Loury will.
mm,
He is imminent. And I don't know their demographics, the Manhattan Institute demographics anymore,
mm,
but I basically think that if you can't let a Glenn Loury Glenn Loury shouldn't have to toe a line.
yeah,
I don't know that he went so far afoul of whatever their political posture is that it was worth this. I'm thinking that Rayhan Salon, is it Salon? I know who Rayhan is. I don't think, I don't think it would surprise me if there wasn't a lot of pressure on um, Rayhan. I don't, to be honest, I'm just kind of confused. I mean, Glenn Loury is Glenn Loury, and
mhm,
that, he didn't do anything egregious or lead a protest. I would think you would want a little bit of independence
yeah.
with your senior people.
And there was this, I think it was Catherine Brodsky. She's also a commentator on YouTube, Substack, and all that. So there was a time a few weeks ago where she wrote that, oh, she wants to work for a think tank that will give her the freedom to, be herself and put her ideas out there. And I literally responded, I said, this is a bad move because you're never going to get a think tank that's going to let you be independent, that's going to let you just say whatever you want to say or write whatever you're passionate about. These people are ideologically driven. The only reason they are going to associate with you is because they find that you align ideologically with them. And I'm sure the Manhattan Institute is a conservative think tank. Glenn Loury obviously is a conservative, a black conservative who has a lot of commentary on race issues. So I can see why he was attractive for them to have him on as a partner, right? But then just this one issue where he's sort of run afoul, and definitely just like you said, it wasn't something egregious. It wasn't even as passionate as a Candace Owens would have been on this issue. He just stated his issue, and this is what comes up. It's anyway. Let's continue.
And shared priorities. And so I assume it's that we don't share priorities. And the priorities that I assume we don't share have to do with me inviting an historian colleague of mine on the show, the Glenn Show, to talk about the post October 7th, 2023 incursion of the IDF into Gaza, which he characterized in the same kind of language that international human rights organizations have used as being, if not genocide, then in the same ballpark and something that one needs to be concerned about from a human rights perspective. He thinks the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice are right to take initiatives that are holding Israeli officials to account for the prosecution of that conflict. And I had him on the show. Now, who?
Can you remember this woman that Glenn Loury had on multiple times? She's a professor. She's very provocative on race issues. She's Jewish anyway. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Amy Wax.
Yeah, Amy Wax. So Glenn
Yes,
Loury
I
could have
remember
Amy
Amy
Wax
Wax.
on. Glenn Loury could have Amy Wax on. No issues whatsoever. But God forbid Glenn Loury brings on a historian. And I'm not sure during this conversation, Glenn was very, 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 he probably pushed back. He probably asked tough questions and all that. God forbid he brings on a historian to discuss a conflict that involves Israel. I mean, it just seems as if criticizing Israel is a red line. When you criticize Israel, then there are going to be repercussions for it. What do you think?
Yeah. You know what? Amy Wax is much more, she probably said more controversial things. But I won't. What do you think? Is this a cautionary tale? I don't know that he did anything that would warrant, this kind of treatment.
Yeah, I didn't get the last part of what you said. It was cut off a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think that he did. Amy Wax, having her on, in my opinion, is way more controversial than
Yeah.
anything, he would have said on Palestine. So I don't know what's in the mind of Manhattan Institute. Look, maybe there's something we don't know about. Maybe there's something Glenn isn't being upfront about. I hope it's not that esoteric that he kind of stepped outside of their their Gaza hard line. I think
Mhm.
Manhattan Institute comes off looking bad on this one.
Yeah, but it doesn't deter them. It doesn't deter them. All the things Israel's been doing since October 7th has become of looking bad, but they just double down. It's as if it doesn't matter what you think about them, what the opinions are. They're just going to do whatever they want to do, and it's a bad look.
Well, it's a bad
Who is he?
look in
His
that
name is Omar.
Manhattan Institute doesn't seem that independent. Honestly, if they're
Yeah,
a think tank, I mean, that's why I'm saying it's worse for them than for Glenn Loury. He comes off as,
yeah,
hey, I'm a little bit of an independent thinker. They
mm,
do not come across that way.
yeah. And if you can even see this with the Daily Wire and Candace Owens. Candace, for all drama and whatever, she's not a good person to associate with anyway. But for all that she's been through with the Daily Wire, she's actually thriving. The Daily Wire is going down the shits. I mean, they fired Jeremy Boring.
Yep.
Their numbers are looking terrible. Um, so by the end of the day, it seems those institutions who have the power, who are not giving those who work with them, but are not giving them the freedom to express their views on certain things, they end up having problems later on, and the people that they fired end up doing pretty well. Because
Well, the thing is
Glenn
Daily
didn't
Wire is
need.
not a think tank.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just drawing some
Well, know what
parallels
I'm
that.
saying? The word think is literally in there. You know, it's
So
like
this is even
you're not
worse.
giving him room to think.
Yeah, so this is even worse than what the Daily Wire did.
In my opinion.
That's crazy.
Holding Israeli officials to account for the prosecution of that conflict. And I had him on the show.
Now, who is he?
His name is Omer Bartov.
Omar Bartov.
He's a student of the Holocaust, of the Nazi extermination campaign in Eastern Europe, and has written books about that. And he's been my colleague for 20 years at Brown. I've gotten to know him, and I knew that he was engaging these questions in a controversial manner, and I wanted to hear from him, so I had him on the show.
So he's a professor at Brown.
Yeah, he's a very distinguished historian.
And I think it's fair to say he's not an anti-Semite.
He's Israeli.
Oh. Okay. I just wanted this to be clear to everyone listening. So it's not like you didn't have Louis Farrakhan on the show to like call Judaism a gutter religion or something. You had an Israeli historian of the Holocaust on.
No, and there were objections coming from the staff at MI, and they asked that we not, in promoting the show, make mention of the Institute, of the Manhattan Institute, in connection with this particular episode. And there were other incidents. The Black American writer Ta-Nehisi Coates came out with a book called The Message. in which he describes writing about politics. And there are several chapters. One reviews his first visit to Africa and talks about his encounter with the Senegalese and the complex dynamic of an African American thinking of himself as an African, but not really being an African.
Yes.
In Africa. Another essay describes him going to a small town in South Carolina that had banned one of his books because it's critical race theory, and finding that the people there were more complicated and interesting and malleable, that is open to discourse than he would have imagined, and sort of exposing the complexity of this moment in our cultural history of anti-racism and anti-racism. But the main bulk of the book is devoted, in Coates's book, The Message, to recounting his experience as a visitor on the West Bank of Palestine. And he's appalled by what he sees, and he says so. And in conversation with John McWhorter, who is a regular conversation partner of mine at the podcast, I allowed as how I admired the book. I said it was not without its flaws, and it should be understood that I have been sharply critical of Ta-Nehisi Coates' other writings.
Oh, I remember very well.
So it's very clear that his firing had something to do with this issue, because from what he said, the Manhattan Institute had told him that that particular episode, it shouldn't be mentioned. The relationship between Glenn and the Manhattan Institute should not be mentioned. It's the sponsorship of that episode. So that in itself is a red flag. And then on top of that, his admiration for woke, anti-racist, race baiting, quote unquote, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Maybe that was what did him in. What do you think?
Well, I think that to be honest, I don't understand these people. Now, Glenn, basically, he's old enough, he's experienced enough, he's seasoned enough to know that if Manhattan Institute says, don't mention us, that he is going to wind up in hot water. So I think Glenn probably, maybe he calculated it, but if they're telling you we don't want to be, we disassociate after what, a couple years, like how many people actually have their shows sponsored by a think tank? If they say, hey, we're not sure we want to be associated with this, and you go through with it anyway, so Glenn rolled the dice.
But
Now, I still think
do you
Manhattan
think,
Institute loses, but Glenn knew what he was doing. He called their hand.
no, but are you sure he actually went ahead to, I may have to go look at that episode. Are you sure that he mentioned the Manhattan Institute when promoting that particular
No,
episode?
I don't think he did. What I'm saying is if your sponsor, your major sponsor says, hey, look, this is so hot, we don't mention us, we don't want to be associated with it. That means, hey, if you go through with this episode, they may just go, hey, look, you're going rogue.
I see. Wow, that's interesting.
And hey, essentially what they told him is our paths are diverging. We told you, hey, we're not comfortable with this, don't mention us, but you did it anyway. Yeah. Given that information, it's not surprising. He knew, dude, he is like 75 and has been teaching in the Ivy League probably most of his life. He knows the politics. If they're saying, hey, we don't know, if you do it, they may be okay with it, they may not. It's a roll of the dice. Glenn Loury rolled the dice because he's Glenn Loury and he can.
Did you think somewhere in his mind he thought that, I'm Glenn Loury, nothing's going to happen?
Yes. I'm not going to let. Now, I'm not saying it was like, hey, he held up a black gloved fist,
Yeah,
but they didn't say, Glenn, don't do it. They said,
yeah,
Glenn, we don't want to be associated with it. That's very
mhm,
subtle,
yeah.
Glenn. I mean, it's subtle. I mean,
It's
if I were
almost
working a job and they say, hey, look, your politics, if you go to this rally, um, we don't want you to wear our corporate logo on your t-shirt. I'm going to go,
yeah,
well, you know what? They probably don't want me to do this, but they're not going to tell me not to.
exactly.
When I come back home or go to work on that Monday, they may just go, hey, we tried to be subtle.
Wow.
He had a very famous essay in The Atlantic, I think 2014 or 2015, called The Case for Reparations, which I objected to and said so at length. And then he published a best-selling book called Between the World and Me, which was very widely praised and widely read. And I had deep problems with it, which I discussed at length on the podcast. So I'm generally disposed to be a conservative critic of cults. But I admired the book. And I admired in particular the essay in which he reflected on what he saw in the West Bank. I didn't necessarily agree with all of his sensibilities and so on, but I thought it was a interesting, provocative, insightful, humane engagement with a difficult, very difficult set of issues. Well, the party line on the book, including at the Manhattan Institute, is this is unspeakable. This is the black guy who doesn't know what the F he's talking about, wandering around on the West Bank in the company of some anti-Zionist.
The Manhattan Institute actually said he's a black guy who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, or that's just Glenn's interjection or interpolation.
That's probably Glenn.
Okay.
And I mean,
Okay.
you know what? Go ahead and play. Look, Glenn is living some of the stuff over the decades that he says doesn't happen. Oh, they're just making it up. This
Mm.
is his cautionary tale.
Yep.
They did this to Glenn Loury. Imagine what they do to someone with, less stature.
Mm-hmm.
So if Glenn, I mean, in my mind, the cautionary tale is if this can happen to a Glenn Loury who is legendary, um, he is probably in stature these days, maybe second only to a Thomas Sowell.
Yep.
And if Manhattan Institute does not, here's the deal. Thomas Sowell would not have done what Glenn Loury did. I appreciate, even though I don't agree with a lot of his politics, he is, and you'll have to excuse me saying this, he is a black man. You know what? Hey, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to do what I think is right. I'm not going to toe the party line. Either they catch up or deal with it, or we part ways, which has happened. I think it was a roll of the dice. And I
Mm.
think Glenn Loury, he etches up a little bit in my respect. He did what he thought was right, and they didn't say don't do it. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to push the boundaries a little bit. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And when I saw this, I was like, okay, maybe there's hope for Glenn Loury after all. Well,
You know,
I'm not holding out so much hope. This might just be a fluke. Uh, anyway, this particular incident just throws a wrench in the meritocracy arguments, where they always say,
oh
"Oh, the
boy,
best
howdy
person,
does it.
the absolute best person always gets." In this situation, in this particular situation, Glenn has found out that there are many other factors that come into play aside competence. There are many other factors, and one of them is
Absolutely.
whether you're ideologically aligned with with whatever institutes or you
Mhm.
get. So those people who keep mentioning meritocracy, pure meritocracy, they're just living in a fantasy land. They're not living in the real world because life is
Well,
complex.
it's a little more subtle than that. Look, there's never been, it's almost like capitalism.
Yeah,
There has never been a pure market economy
yeah,
that's ever existed. Kind of the
true.
same thing with the meritocracy.
Mm-hmm,
Sometimes it's meritocratic, sometimes it's who you know, sometimes
mm-hmm,
it's your politics.
yeah,
So, it's an imperfect system that people sometimes want to pretend is perfect.
mm-hmm,
Um, but like I said, if you see, if you are a Thomas Sowell, and I'm gonna pick on Dr. Sowell,
mm,
if you think it's perfectly meritocratic, and I guarantee you, Thomas Sowell would probably never say that, but
mm,
these people who want to go, hey, it's not about your politics.
mm,
Now they're wrong. The meritocracy is also kind of a good old boy network. The good old boy network can work around a meritocracy.
mm.
Um, Now, here is the conundrum. Does he bring race into it? I know Glenn's not going to, but
No.
what if this had been Charles Murray?
Mm,
Would they have done it? I don't think Charles Murray would have done it. He probably would have been a little bit more, hey, if I can't mention them, they must be, telling me.
mm.
Um, it's probably a whole nother show. But I am not above saying, hey, look, um, I'm not sure this would have happened to Charles Murray. It's hypothetical, and I'm
Mm.
being a little bit of a devil's advocate because I actually think it would have, but I don't think Charles Murray would have shown that kind of backbone.
Yeah, I don't think this is. I don't think this has anything to do with race. Yeah, I
We
just think.
think, but humor me here because I know you're gonna smirk. But can you rule it out 100%?
And nothing is ever 100%. Nothing is ever that certain.
And now you enter into a black man in America. You know, you know, probably it's not, but you can't say absolutely it's not.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe it's ten
Well, you
percent.
never do. And you know what? Glenn Lowry would never stoop to that level, but a Stanley
Mm.
Cross might. There might be a lawsuit. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Jews, and coming back and talking about it as if it were, he uses the word apartheid. Coates uses the word apartheid. He said, what I saw.
Africa's foremost tech business event is back. The largest
In the West Bank, this is the West Bank, not Gaza, was reminiscent to me of what I saw in South Africa. And I didn't like what I saw, and it's wrong. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's wrong. And I don't care what account you're giving of the history. He has read some of the history, but he's not deeply versed in the historical record of how the circumstance in Palestine has come to be. But his basic point is, look, I'm telling you, what I'm seeing there is not healthy, it's not humane, and it's not right. And I had some appreciation for his courage to say so and for the artful way in which he said so. And I said so on the show.
People.
So let's say so. What do you think about Coates' characterization of Israel and Palestine? Do you think it's an apartheid state?
Well, I haven't read Coates's book. I guess maybe I should at some point. Um, I love Israel. I've been to Haifa, spent a week there, and you know, Haifa, at least, might be on my bucket list. I absolutely adored Israel. However, you know, to use a very loose analogy, almost disrespectful, but you know what? I didn't raise my son exactly the way my parents raised me. I
Mm,
give them high honor. They are my heroes. I don't have heroes other than my parents, but I didn't do everything exactly the way, there were some things that I didn't like growing up and I didn't do them. I did them a little differently.
yeah.
So all I'm saying is that Israel, as much as I love it, I love the experience. Cruel is cruel. Sometimes you don't have to take over the whole thing. Sometimes you have to be careful of civilians. There
Mm,
are kids there. Do you really want to? Is it so worth it to go in and hunt down? I saw a story today. Rafah, um,
mm,
they basically leveled Rafah, and that's where the
People are the one.
civilians in Gaza used to go over as an
mm,
escape. So there's no Rafah anymore for them to escape to.
mm.
Is Hamas really to be hunted down to the point where kids are like, there's no way you can go in there and do this sort of vigilantism and not know there's going to be collateral damage. Innocent people will die just, you know, I don't know. It's a conundrum. I understand Israel's point of view, but there are limits to everything.
Yeah, but you didn't answer whether you thought Israel is an apartheid state.
Yes, obviously they are.
Oh, good. Because
Well, I mean, look, they have it's almost like a Bantustan. We don't occupy you, but we blockade you. You
mm,
can't come to work in Israel without going through checkpoints. Apartheid is apart.
mm,
So, just simply by definition.
mm. And yeah, you're right. Israel is an apartheid state.
I love Israel. I loved Haifa. My Lord, I loved Haifa. But you know what? I understand that they might feel threat. If you let Hamas survive, they're gonna do this again. That's gonna happen if you don't deal harshly. But somehow or another, you've got to strike a middle balance. And I don't know how to do it. I'm not offering solutions. I'm just saying that apartheid is apartheid, and maybe they should just go, hey, you know what? It's apartheid, but it needs to be. Don't pretend it's not an apartheid state.
exactly.
Just say, hey, we need to get rid of habeas corpus, like Trump is trying to do.
Yeah.
He's
I,
at least he's being upfront about it.
yeah. I think one of my biggest issues with Israel is the damn lies and for seemingly inconsequential things, right? I saw a clip yesterday. I even made a little video about it of an Israeli spokesperson who was it was an interview with a British journalist, and the British journalist was asking him that, okay, so the US has gone ahead to broker a hostage deal with Hamas, boycotting Israel without Israel being in the picture. They've signed a ceasefire with the Houthis without Israel being in the picture. Don't you think that this is a strain on US? As in, don't you? He just mentioned these facts and probably asked the man, "What do you think about these facts?" And the
Well,
Israeli spokesperson could not bring himself to acknowledge reality. This was his response. His response was that, well, this is what Hamas wants people to think. And the journalist was like, but this is fact. It's a fact that the US has gone ahead to do these
okay,
negotiations
which
without you.
part which part of America First didn't Israel understand?
I don't know. But apparently, America First is Hamas propaganda. So for these very little things, things that have no, they will have no impact whatsoever if they told the truth. It will have absolutely no impact. I mean, look at what happened after October 7th. What Hamas did was bad enough. Like, you didn't even need to, you didn't even need to exaggerate a little bit for it to be recognized that October 7th was a disaster, was a tragedy, was something that should never have happened. But then they came with the 40 beheaded babies story in Hovens and so on and so forth, just to make it seem like it was already bad. You did not need that. You didn't need that to have the sympathy. But it's something I've seen with the Israeli government over and over again. They lie for very little and inconsequential things. Look at the World Food Kitchen staff that they killed. They said that they said that they were not in a marked vehicle. They were not in a vehicle that was identifiable. The same thing with the ones that they just killed of recent, the food aid workers, that their light was not on. Their light was on. It was later on when the camera of one of those who was killed was found, and they saw the footage very, very clear. It showed very clearly that these were aid workers, but they were hunted down and killed anyway. And Israel just lied. So they keep lying about everything. I would, if they just came out and said, you know what, yeah, it's an apartheid system, but for good reason. If you can give for good reason, there's a reason why we have this in place, because we cannot risk our security, because people over in Gaza, there are terrorist elements in Gaza that are trying to kill us. So this is reasonable measure. But no, they'll claim it's a democracy. They'll claim, oh, it's not a blockade. They'll claim, I have seen videos of people living in the West Bank, from one settlement in the West Bank, from one village to in the West Bank to another village. You have to go through Israeli military checkpoints.
Right. Yeah.
It's crazy. And they're going to tell you, oh, it's not an apartheid system.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I too, for the life of me, and I just don't understand. You know how I feel about Donald Trump. You know, I just think a lot of the stuff he does is egregious. However, you got to give him credit. He talked about what he was going to do last summer on the campaign trail, and people voted for him. Now, I got a lot of, whoa, he's just kidding. Well, apparently he wasn't. But you can't say he didn't telegraph what he was going to do. And I think Israel, you know, if you're going to have to do some horrible stuff, just let people know, hey, it's going to be ugly. You know, this is what we think. We're going to have to do apartheid. We have to go all South Africa, you know, 1970s South Africa, because we feel threatened.
Yeah, own your shit. Own your shit. And that's one of Trump's appeal. Trump owns his shit. He doesn't lie about his bad behavior. He just owns his shit, right? And almost everything about Israel is just lies, damn lies, and it's so infuriating. I mean, the level of respect that I've lost for Israel, you can't even quantify it. I don't think there was a nation that I respected more than Israel prior to like last year. Yeah, I so respected Israel.
Do you think it's Israel or just the leadership? Because I you know what, I would love for Netanyahu to go, and it's not my place to want him to go, etc. But I just, you know, Netanyahu has been part of the problem. There's corruption, etc., etc. And you know, I think they could use a change in leadership.
Yeah. Did you see that that new documentary by this British BBC journalist? Forgotten the title of. Why am I forgetting things? I forgot that it's a recent documentary. Maybe I'll share a link with you. Although they've taken it down, BBC has taken it down as usual. So what the journalist basically did was to go into Israel and go into the occupied West Bank and just ask questions. And it was an insight into the minds of Israelis, and it was, God, it was dark. There was this woman who is the leader of a settler movement, and she she essentially was just saying, so when the journalist asked her about the settlements and all that, and she was like, well, he asked her if the government supports these rogue settlers, and she said that if you ask Netanyahu about this on the news, he'll say no, he doesn't support it, he's not happy about it. But that Netanyahu is happy about what they are doing, that they are helping the government, right? They are giving legitimacy to the government to do these things. They go into a place, they create new settlements, illegal settlements. They make sure that they have enough Jews there to force the government to recognize those settlements as part of Israel. So she was saying that they are doing the dirty work for the government, that they're forcing the hands of the government to do these things, right? So it just shows it's, and I've seen so many videos of comments by the Israeli society, and in a way, Israel is a perfect Middle Eastern country. It's not different from its neighbors. Yes, it's very fitting in terms of
wow.
In terms of, just name it, in terms of how will you call it, being extremist, in terms of just whether religious extremism, whether terrorism, whatever. It's a perfect Middle Eastern country. It's no better than its neighbors.
Probably right. You know, they're their neighbors, but with a little bit more of an existential zeal. You know, we will survive at all costs, and don't get in our way. And I don't know. I'm just not that level of expert. I can't give advice. I don't have suggestions other than I just wish they could do better. I don't see how you can oppose or oppress a people to the level that they did with Gaza and expect to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
And then Trump's idea, remember Trump proposing we just get them all out. Just like send them to other countries.
The funny thing is
like,
that,
what?
do you know that every argument that's been used against the Palestinians were arguments that were used against Jews in Europe? For example, the Israelis will be like, oh, there's something fundamentally wrong with the Palestinians. Why don't other Arab countries just take them in? That's why they don't take them in. I'm like, okay, first of all, that's not true. About 40% of Jordan's population, Palestinian refugees, right? There's a significant proportion of Palestinians in Egypt and some other Arab countries. But it's racist to just say, just because they are Arabs, other Arab countries need to take them in. It doesn't make sense.
It is, but it's not so much. It's not as racist as you might think. But the reason other countries don't want to is something to do. Anan will tell you about it. It's like the Muslim Brotherhood. You know,
no, I get all that. I'm saying that you suggesting that they take them in just because they are Arabs is what I'm saying. It's just like saying, just because
oh, I see what you're saying.
You understand what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, it's like Pan-Africanism. You know, if I go to Africa and they go, well, gee, you don't know how to be African. But I insist that I am African. Well, you know what? Israel says, well, Stanley, you're close. Take him in because he's got brown skin.
Yeah,
I get
and
it.
these were the same things that were said about Jews. Oh, there's something wrong with Jews. That's why they were kicked out of 100 and something countries, right? And you're using the same argument against Palestinians. You say, oh, they were in Jordan, they were kicked out of Egypt, and so on and so forth. Literally
but
the same.
I'm gonna be honest though, and I know I'm cutting you off a little bit, but
Mm,
I kind of have to just go, I think Jews, not necessarily Israel.
mm,
And maybe I shouldn't even talk about this. Israel as a country, and let's just take the religious part of it out, because part of their problem is they're literally like a theocracy in a way.
yeah, yeah.
And
A secular
that's part of
theocracy.
their problem.
You see why I say they are a perfect Middle Eastern country, right? You have
Yeah.
theocracies all around the Middle East. There is
Yeah.
almost literally no Middle Eastern country that isn't a theocracy, that isn't
Gotcha.
almost a
Yep.
dictatorship, that isn't almost an ethno state.
Hmm.
Israel will tell you that, well, they're Arab ethno states. Why shouldn't there be a Jewish ethno state? And I'm like, well, duh. The Arab ethno states, are they like beacons of democracies?
No,
Don't you
I
see
get you.
don't you see problems with their model? Why do you want to adopt that model? It literally makes no sense. Oh my goodness. Anyway.
One thing that actually matter in this world. Every life is holy and sacred and beautiful. That's a
There's some ad.
will have the knowledge
That the John
matters.
and
In the same restrained, non-radical way you're describing it now to me?
yeah. I just basically said, this is something that has to be reckoned with. I said to John, my partner in conversation, who's also an African-American. He teaches at Columbia University and writes a regular piece, a newsletter for the New York Times. And he took exception, and John and I went back and forth about this. But, and it came to like me saying what I actually thought about what was happening in Gaza. And what I thought was October 7th, 2023 was horrific. What Hamas did was barbaric. I'm against it. I have no brief for it whatsoever. However, what I saw proceeding in the aftermath of that was a campaign of collective punishment that was horrific in the extreme. And I didn't want to have my country having anything to do with it. And I wasn't afraid to say so. Now, I didn't say it quite that directly, but that's pretty much the burden of what it is I had to say.
And that's a very reasonable position to hold. That's I can see why the other side wouldn't like it, but it's a very reasonable position to hold. Nothing excuses October 7th, right? Nothing can excuse it. In just the same way, October 7th is not enough justification for what Israel is doing currently in Gaza, with the level of destruction, the calumny, with just the overhandedness. Yeah. And
Well, I
that's what.
know it sounds kind of, I don't know, kind of high-handed, we go high. But when you start becoming as depraved as the people you're fighting, or you think the people you're fighting are, how are you better?
You're not. You aren't, and they aren't.
Right.
And I've had this conversation on Substack with a whole lot of people, and I'm telling them the Israelis are no better than their Arab neighbors. They're not. They just have a facade of civility and democracy, but underneath it all, it's the same thing.
Right.
And when you say that, when you criticize Israel, it will seem as if you are in support of Arabs, or you're supporting terrorism or extremism. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying
Charles,
is that
let me just break it down for you. I think Netanyahu is an extremist. I
he
think
is.
Israel's leadership is extremist, And,
Yeah.
I'm going to bring it down to my personal experience, maybe over the past month. You know what? It is like, people just, critical African thinkers. I used to think that critically thinking was kind of like a de facto thing with people, and it is so not true.
Yeah.
And I'm talking people who are raising other kids in their 30s and 40s. These people couldn't think, and I'm talking my personal experience in my little, John Galt sphere. These people are not good at thinking. They're not good at it. And it amazes me. I'm like, what? You're drawing this analogy, or you are criticizing people and you're doing the same thing they are. What on earth?
And you
So,
don't see the irony in that.
oh, it's more than irony, it's tragedy. It's like these people are raising kids.
It's sad. But where does honesty come into critical thinking? Because
Well,
in
the
a way,
funny thing is I don't think people, if you're not good at critical thinking, you're not going to be good at honesty and vice versa. You
yeah.
must
But which
look,
comes first? Which
there's
comes first? Is it?
honesty.
Yeah.
Because see, a 5-year-old isn't going to be able to critically think, but they're gonna know how to be honest if they're
Yeah.
taught that way.
Yeah.
Okay, I think honesty is a fundamental that you literally, one of the first things you should teach your kids is not to lie.
Mhm.
Did you poop on the floor? Did you know what I'm saying? The
Yeah.
fundamentals. Hey, it's not a big deal if you peed, somewhere you shouldn't have, but I need to know so I know where to clean it up.
Yeah.
Okay, that honesty comes first, and then you learn the critical thinking.
Yeah.
It's my opinion, and I remember I'm thinking of when we were toilet training our son. One of these days, I'll have to tell you this story offline, and it was obvious. You know what? We as parents were not recognizing what our son wanted,
Mm.
and I have to tell you this. We bought this toilet like Sesame Street toilet training seat. You put it on top of the toilet, and
Mm.
we could never get him to use it. You will ultimately, you know what it was? He wanted to poop and pee like an adult. So he wanted to use the
Okay.
adult toilet seat.
Adult one.
You know what?
Mm.
And you know what? I used to walk him into that bathroom so he could
Mm.
poop. And I know this is horrible, but hey, he was 2. So I used to walk into that bathroom with him because I was so afraid he would fall into the toilet. He had to put his arms down to balance himself, and I was
Mm.
afraid he was going to fall in. But you know what? He would not use that little kid seat. He
Yeah.
wanted this. And you know what? Once we figured that out, never had a problem again.
Exactly. Exactly.
So the bottom line is truth. We weren't, really recognizing the truth. He was telling us the truth. We just didn't recognize it. And once we
Yeah.
did, never again.
Yeah.
We didn't have to buy diapers anymore. He had no more accidents.
Yeah.
Truth
So
before critical thinking.
exactly. And that's why some seemingly intelligent people make ridiculous arguments because they're not honest. Because if they were honest
Right.
enough, they would see the flaws of their arguments, but they don't.
Well, I mean, in politics, you might not want the truth to be known. So, there are caveats to that, but I'm not a politician. I'm at a point, but truth before critical thinking, it's essential to know how to critically think.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
true.
So but that's it. You didn't say you didn't like espouse violence or
No. I basically took up the cause that has animated a lot of agitation, not just on college campuses in the United States, but in public opinion throughout the world, to say, stop it. I called for a ceasefire with the release of the hostages, of course. But I said, this is not what a civilized country should be doing, and I object.
that doesn't seem, I mean, people could disagree with you for sure, but it doesn't seem like radical or crazy.
No,
Do you get Tucker Carlson's angle? I mean, he's what's his deal? Tucker Carlson isn't essentially pro-Palestine, but same with Candace Owens. What do you think their deal is?
Grift.
Mm.
It's
Because
as simple as that.
because they seem as if they are against this war for the benefit of the Palestinians, but it just doesn't sit well with me. I don't think Tucker
Well, the
Carlson.
bottom line is, I don't get Candace Owens because I think the farmers, the English family she married into, I thought they were Catholic, but they've got a Jewish background. And to be
Oh,
honest, I'm kind of, I could be wrong. It's been, years, but I seem to have come across that reading. But the bottom line is, I thought they were Catholic, and she seems to be a little bit more evangelical. Tucker Carlson, I don't know what's up with him, but he has been literally a performer back since the Crossfire days when he used to wear that big bow tie. He's always been a bit theatrical, and you don't know. And it's funny you bring up honesty. I don't see Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson as poster children for honesty.
mm.
There's something about them that's shifty.
Yeah, it's
And as a matter of fact, this is just me reading body language. I think Glenn is kind of a mouse that Tucker Carlson's playing with, and I'm trying
yeah,
to figure out why.
yeah, yeah. And someone made that comment that they were disappointed that Glenn, after all this, ran to Tucker Carlson, or at least went to him first with this kind of. It just seemed to chip in the information and chip in his person.
Well, I don't know why, but I'll be honest. I think, and I could be wrong, but what does Glenn Loury have to win? Why does he even need to? Hey, you know what? You lost, your senior fellowship. Why does he even need, at his age? He's got a beautiful wife who's younger. He's had a successful career. Just wrote a book that was well received. Why does he even need to? Why doesn't he just go fishing? No, I'm dead serious. Now, I understand he's had a storied career and, it's probably tough to do. So I understand, but you know what? Maybe it's just, do the special appearance. Maybe this is a special appearance. I imagine Tucker Carlson, made it attractive.
Yeah. Well, the question you asked is something I also ask myself. Why are people crazy about either wealth or fame, or I don't know. At a certain point in your life, when you're comfortable enough,
Yes.
There are certain things that you really need more of that. I tell myself that someone asked me what would you what would give you some sort of fulfillment at old age, and
Mm-hmm.
this is something I've always had as a child. Do you know what would make me happy at old age? It's not wealth. I want, of course, I want to have enough money to be able to take care of myself, but it's not a outrageously massive business empire. It's just raising animals, having a small farm where I can wake up in the morning and go out and look at chickens and my rabbits and my, you know,
Well, you
just
know what? Unfortunately, you and I are the same.
it's it.
Give me a garden. Charles, I literally live like a 15-minute walk from a pretty good fishing hole. I
Yeah,
got trees around the house. My son is not in jail. He's at a really good school.
yeah,
Um, you know, um, there's such a thing as, like you said, hey, I don't have to worry about how I'm going to eat or pay a bill,
yeah,
but I can't go out and buy a Mercedes. But I don't need a Mercedes, don't want one. Dude,
yeah,
it's almost and you're religious and I'm not particularly, but I was raised that way. Dude, I'd be perfectly fine. The my only extravagance these days is I like to cook, so I like buying expensive ingredients to make a
mm,
fancy meal every now and again. But
mm,
that's it.
yeah.
I have clothes, I have shirts. I'm wearing a t-shirt right now. It's an old Eddie Bauer t-shirt that I literally bought back in the 90s. I've had this shirt. I've had this shirt for like 20 years.
Mm,
And it's starting to get holes. But you know what? I don't care. It's comfy.
yeah,
It Look, raise your kids to be just, you know, I hope my son does not. And it'll be him if you want to ride around in a Mercedes or, do a startup and become a billionaire, great.
yeah,
But I didn't raise you to be that way.
yeah.
It'll be all on you.
Mm. Life is simple. People try to complicate it.
Oh, it should be. And towards the end, I have to ask you about the new pope.
Well, I
But
don't know.
after this,
Okay, okay. So,
on the way out.
all right.
And a lot of Israelis agree with me.
For sure. Well, including the one you interviewed, I guess. Your colleague at Brown.
Yeah, I mean, Omer, of course, but many.
Yeah, I know.
Did you know that animals listen to dominating tactics because they're scared? If you want,
So what happened next?
Well, next, the outfit called Air Wars, AIRWARS, Air Wars, which is a initiative to study the consequences of aerial bombardment in conflict, put out a report documenting the extensive civilian casualties that were being engendered by the bombing attacks that Israel was conducting in Gaza. And I had one of the people who was sympathetic to the report on the show to discuss the report about.
Damn, Glenn. That must have been it. Not only did you praise Ta-Nehisi Coates' book on the West Bank, brought on someone who was first sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, even though Israeli, and then you brought in someone again to discuss the impact of Israel's bombardment in Gaza. Yeah, I see why they had to let you go. In their mind, Glenn was still going to be carrying placards. He was going to be on the streets with a keffiyeh soon protesting against Israel. That
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. I just don't see Glenn, um, at his age and stature. Um, I don't see him carrying placards,
of
but I
course
can see
he wasn't going
Glenn.
to do
You
that.
know how he'll get emotional when he
Yeah.
feels it, and I suspect there was something else going on. There's always, those waters are always deeper than the
Yeah.
ripples on the surface. There,
Mhm.
there was something else. I suspect. I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing. You don't get. I don't know. It just seems weird that you could just toss it up to, hey, he's getting old and senile. We'll just overlook it. I don't see why this was so, you know, to a point to where um it would come
But
to this.
at times the obvious answer is the correct answer because we've seen so far, we've seen that people who are critical of Israel, they lose their jobs, they lose whatever, they lose. It's as simple as that. So there might be something deeper, but I think this is sufficient an explanation
Mm.
for why they fired him. They didn't need more.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I've always kind of, me, I am not a right winger, but
Mm.
the Manhattan Institute was kind of cool. Um, in my opinion. I don't agree with Heather McDonald or, any of those fools. However, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, except
And
when Israel is concerned.
well, I it's opened my eyes. I can't imagine why. And I'm dead
Civilian
serious.
casualties.
I have no clue why um this old man's thoughts would be so subversive that you'd have to, it's like,
It's
is he
an
bringing down
aversion.
the
It's
whole institute?
it's an extreme aversion to anything critical of Israel, however little or mild. I mean, look at the U.S. Congress, look at the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate. I don't think there is any issue in America that has as much bipartisan support as support for Israel has.
Yeah, but
It's
look at what Trump's doing. He's going a
Yeah, but
little
Trump
bit
is one
against that.
man. Trump is one
Yeah, but
man.
I thought he set on the right side of the
Mhm.
aisle. He sets the tone. Now, this happened before, Trump is doing what he's doing, but he's making a grand tour of the Middle East and he's not going to Israel. Have
Yeah,
you noticed that?
I know Trump. If it were up to the Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment, Trump wouldn't be doing this. But Trump isn't answerable to anyone. He just does what he wants to do.
Right, but the
Which,
thing is I thought Manhattan Institute, all these
Mhm.
right-wing think tanks, Trump set blazes the trail, and he is, and there's something else I read. Trump is souring on Netanyahu, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah, which might be the only good thing
Oh,
that
I
comes
know what
out.
it was. There's a ground news article.
Mm,
The U.S. is sponsoring aid into Gaza. Now, it's a
mm,
private thing. It's not a UN funded thing. It's
mm,
private, but this is from the U.S. into
mm,
Gaza. Whereas last week, Israel just said, "Hey, we're going all in. We're gonna, do somewhat of a Carthage thing.
mm,
We're gonna go in and salt the earth practically."
mm.
And what is going to happen? U.S. aid coming in the next couple weeks. Um, Israel, Netanyahu, probably specifically, they are losing. Um, that hey, we're Israel, we're in trouble. We're going to do what
Mm.
we want to do. I feel that eroding.
Yeah.
Trump is
And
all the way over there and not going to stop by to say hi.
this
Syria, for instance,
yeah.
the Syrian president and Israel is a little lukewarm on this new Syrian government. Trump
Mm.
is literally there shaking hands and talking to the guy.
Trump
There's a
said he's an attractive tough guy.
well, no, what I'm saying is that Trump is not relations are starting to be kind of lukewarm.
Trump loves tough guys.
Well, but the bottom line is apparently Netanyahu isn't that tough anymore.
Well,
Hey,
I think
he's all the way over there. Israel has not recognized the new Syrian government, and Trump
yeah.
is there in Saudi shaking hands. There's something going on there.
Yeah. This might just be the only good thing that comes out of Trump's uniqueness. Him not listening to anyone, not just doing what he wants to do. This might just be the
Maybe
only good
Glenn
thing.
Loury should be more like Trump. He should have joined Hoover. Play the think tanks off of think. I'm joking, Charles.
Damn, I don't think if I ever get to a point um to the level where Glenn Loury got to with his influence and everything, I don't think I'd ever accept to join a think tank.
Well,
Just
here's
one.
the deal. Think of the things Glenn Loury had to do to be in this chair. There's some things that would make me cringe back in the 90s.
Mm,
He started out as a baby daddy, and he was so talented, he wound up tenured at Harvard, screwed that up. He has had a little bit of a self-destructive streak throughout
mm,
his life. So I don't feel bad for him. I kind of don't like what the Manhattan Institute did, but you know
mm.
what? I'm not gonna feel that sorry for Glenn Loury either. He screwed up some chances.
Yeah, but yeah, is that the reason why you shouldn't feel sorry for him? People make mistakes.
Right. But you look, I understand people make mistakes. This dude was the first black tenured economics professor at Harvard in his 30s. Now, everyone messes up, but mess up in the way he messed up, it's kind of unique. He has soul. He is blackety black. If you want to do a rap song, I'm surprised there's never been a Glenn Loury rap song. I'm an eminent Harvard professor, but I became a new baby daddy and did drugs. All I'm saying is it is hard for me to feel sorry for Glenn Loury to a level. I think Manhattan Institute is going to not look good in this, but I'm not overly concerned that Glenn Loury, won't be. I guess what I'm saying is, hey, he's had a successful life in spite of his mistakes. This is not the worst thing that's ever happened to him. That he's on there kind of, I wish Tucker had been there when he had to tell his very accomplished wife that he fathered a child out of wedlock. That would have been a better interview. That you lost a senior fellowship from a think tank. That's very, there have been bigger mistakes he's made. Having courage now, he should have. I'm going all Christian on you, and you're not expecting. It's like this man has made some mistakes, and being courageous about Gaza. Good for him. I know, Charles, I'm embarrassing you, but still.
No, not in the least.
Look, I don't feel that sorry for Glenn. I just think
I don't think
Manhattan made a
I
mistake.
don't think there's anything to feel sorry for him for. I mean, he's not in a bad position, right? I don't feel sorry for him
And
either. I don't
has
think he
Glenn
feels
been
sorry
to?
for himself.
I'll respect him more when he goes to Israel or Gaza.
Why is that necessary?
Oh, just for my satisfaction. if you if you're gonna satisfy, if you're gonna sacrifice a think tank senior fellowship, now's the time to put your money where your mouth is.
So I think I know, and why I know partly why Glenn Loury did this. Glenn Loury is a sort of a very opinionated and a stubborn person, and
Uh-huh.
I feel that at times when someone like a Glenn feels pushed, like when he feels like you can't, he feels like he's getting the vibes or the feeling that someone is telling him you can't say this thing, you can't do this thing. It's just like, damn it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna say it anyway. And damn all the
I
consequences.
agree with that.
And it's the same thing I see with someone like Candace Owens. She might be wrong, but she's very fierce with her. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to say. I'm just gonna do my shit.
Well, the thing is both of them have very plush safety cushions, safety
Yeah,
nets.
yeah, yeah,
Candace Owens literally is married into a family that might even be billionaires. I don't know.
yeah.
And Glenn Lowry, you know what? He will be okay.
Mm-hmm,
Shit, he's probably a millionaire.
mm-hmm,
Um, he will land. They will land very softly and live to go again. Glenn Lowry. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if some little conservative think tank, picks him up and says, "Hey, you know what? Just be associated with us." He's an economist.
mm-hmm,
Life is literally cost benefit analysis to these people.
mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, you know,
But it'd be a
he'll be okay.
letdown. It'd be a letdown, or his stature in my eyes will diminish even further if he takes another think tank.
Basically, he was arguing that the number of women and children killed relative to the number of combatants killed was exceptionally high and reflected tactics that you could question as to whether or not they were absolutely necessary. I mean, he made a collective punishment argument. And I had him in a debate. This guy's name is Andrew Cockerell. He's a historian, PhD student at the London School of Economics. I had him on with Eli Lake, who's a journalist who writes about Middle East and other international affairs.
But it was a debate, so you had both.
Yeah, I had both.
I've never
both
heard
sides.
of Cockerell. I don't know anything
Yeah, well,
about
he's
it.
not very prominent.
Yeah, but Lake is prominent, and but both sides were represented. I guess that's what I just want to establish for.
Yeah, both sides were represented, and they had their back and forth about how do you interpret the data on civilian casualties and the aerial bombardment of this campaign. And then I did a kind of me directly to the camera 10-minute or 15-minute reflection on the interview as a bonus feature of the podcast, which we make available to paying subscribers, and where I interact with someone from my staff who's basically interviews me about the interview that I did. And I was asked, did I learn anything from Eli Lake? And I said, what was I going to learn? And I basically recounted my...
This man is proud. Oh my goodness.
I kind of wonder whether Do you think Glenn is going to be a broadcaster on the Tucker Carlson network? I think it's TCN, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
This is really weird. Tucker Carlson, I don't know. This might be an alliance forming.
Really? I don't think so.
It just seems weird that Tucker is being so gracious.
Anything is possible, but I don't see it.
I don't either.
View, which I've already
why on earth would I hope this is Glenn's swan song. I'm sure he's going to keep the Glenn show, but maybe this is a lesson. Look, dude, you don't need the Manhattan Institute. Just be you.
Yeah.
And I bet that's it. You know what? He might just be going good riddance. I can finally be, the Glenn Loury, Grandpa Glenn Loury. I'm going to say what I want to say. It'll be conservative, but I'm going to say what I want to say.
Yeah.
Maybe this is an advertising thing.
That's the sort of freedom that I admire the most. Being able to say whatever I want to say without being beholden to any censoring authority. It's and I don't know why he wouldn't have thought of that to begin with. Described here of what has been proceeding there in Gaza as a collective punishment that I don't think is justified. And I said as much. I said, no, he said nothing to dissuade me from that point of view. And that got posted. And I got notified the next day that the Manhattan Institute was discontinuing its relationship with me as a senior fellow.
How did they tell you?
I got a note from Raihan saying, as I've mentioned, that we do review our scholar connections from time to time for productivity and shared priorities, and we've decided not to continue to work with you.
The next day?
Yeah.
Did he call you?
No.
Dang, that was fast. The next day.
These Israelis are working overtime.
Is that what it is?
Do you think they have someone in Glenn's network as a paid subscriber just to check out?
No, I hope not.
Oh my, yeah. So, well, I think you wanted to ask me something about the Pope, the new Pope.
Oh yeah, what do you think of him? An American Pope. Kind of he has some African American heritage, and
Really?
there are people. Oh yeah,
Really?
He's a Creole, yeah.
Oh.
Like Louisiana Creole. They're like one of his maybe great grandparents was full blown African American. So well, it's not so much knowing this, you know what? I like him even better. He might bring me back to the church. He's American, he's kind of mixed. He's kind of, he strikes me as kind of center left.
Yeah.
But the point is, and his brother, there's an interview. I'll put that link in the Discord. Dude, his brother was MAGA, is MAGA, like Florida MAGA. And you know what his the most poignant thing he said is, hey, you know what? I'm going to tone it down. But no, he was MAGA.
His brother said he was going to tone down his...
Oh, yeah, the politics. I mean, he's been online, on like social media before, his brother was elected Pope. And, he was like political MAGA. He's like on the social media stuff. Can't think of anything off the top. Nothing egregious, but yeah, you knew he was MAGA. And it is so nice that he's like, hey, you know what? I will tone it down. And I think that's sweet. I think that is nice.
It's his brother. It's not him, so it doesn't matter to me either way. But
Yeah, well, this dude's a world leader. His brother is a world leader.
yeah,
Literally, the Pope is a world, and and I'm Catholic, so I might be a little fawning over this, but
yeah.
it's good to see an American Pope.
Well, an American Pope is weird to me. I always,
Me,
you know,
me too, me too. You know what? He's probably heard Bruce Springsteen. What's going to happen when they play Born in the USA in a mass in the Sistine Chapel?
well, but I think I like the fact that he's well, I like and I'm weary. I like the fact that he's progressive. I'm not Catholic. I
Wouldn't call him
disagree with.
progressive. He's described as moderate, which is
Yeah,
progressive in the Catholic Church.
well, moderate, whatever you want to call it, right? Um, I'm not Catholic. I disagree with a lot of Catholic teachings and doctrines, but as as a religious person, I think that religious institutions should be true to their their core tenets, their doctrines, their beliefs, and they shouldn't sacrifice that for secular things. I mean,
Right.
for trying to be more secular, trying to be more hip, and so on and so forth, right? So that's why I'm usually wary when religious leaders becomes very, very progressive. Yeah, you
Well,
could love me, why
I
not?
have a fondness. I
Yeah,
learned honesty. I learned critical thinking.
yeah,
Even, I also learned being honest is actually telling the truth is actually has high comedic value, believe that or not.
yeah,
But critical thinking, excuse me, and honesty,
yeah,
the Benedictines taught me that as a teenager, and they weren't my parents,
mm,
that's, but I learned, I don't know. I really think highly of certain orders of priests. The
mm,
Benedictines trained me, and for better or for worse, at least I know how to think critically.
yeah,
Because I remember, and I'll tell you this funny story.
mm,
I had a chemistry test, and I did not. We're in the middle of the test, and I'm sniffing because I'm snotting. I had a cold. And it's silent, it's a hard test, and finally the nun who taught the class, because everyone could hear me sniffing, she goes, Cross, go blow your nose, because I didn't want to ask her, like, she wouldn't. I didn't think she would let me out from the test,
mm,
and finally she just got tired of it. Cross, go blow your nose. If I'd been critically thinking and honest, I would have just asked her, hey, Sister
yeah,
Johanna, can I go blow my nose? I'll be right back.
true.
Just little silly things like that stick with you.
Yeah. Anyway, I think this would be a good place to draw this show to a close. Good talk, Stanley. Enjoyed having this conversation with you. So
I did too, Charles, as
yeah,
always.
hopefully by God's grace, we'll be here next week, Thursday, to talk about something else. We should
Okay.
probably talk about that lady who called the black kid the N word, and she's being rewarded for it.
Oh
But
boy, howdy. Do I want to talk about that? My conservative urban landlord. Oh,
yeah,
dude, they were so excited. They put like her money count in the
Mm.
chat. Like, ooh, she's up to $750,000. And you know, on my show, someone decided to come into the chat and start posting it. And I'm like, don't bring that stuff over here. You know, we do a different show. And it was like almost like a Glenn Loury. Well, you know what? You said I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I don't generally like time people out from the chat. I did it. I literally said, don't bring that sort of race, politics, all that stuff. And he was a moderator, as a matter of fact. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care if you're a moderator, you're out of here. Don't do it. It's my show. When I say don't do it, I wasn't kidding. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, let's talk Shiloh. I have all kinds of things to say. As a matter of fact, we have to co-host it. I will bring people over here. It'll be a hootenanny.
That'll be good, Stanley. All right. See ya.
Take it easy.
Yeah, bye.